I don't know how many of you are familiar with Ann-Margaret Carrozza and her new book, Love and Money, How to Protect Yourself from Scammers. This is a show I have been wanting to give attention to for such a long time because it's very personal for me. Not only I've been scammed, we always think of scammers as people who are strangers and they target you and unfamiliar to you. But let me tell you, often scammers are people that you know best, people that you trust, that you go in business with, you make investments, they make promises. People are constantly looking to find new ways to steal your money. I'm telling you, they are. I'm going to make a confession. Listen, I'm going to make a confession. I've probably been scammed now. I know over $1 million. Fact, over $1 million I've lost over the years. It's a fact. So when I say this is very personal to me, it is very personal. And I'm so glad, Ann-Margaret, you are joining us tonight to talk about scammers. And listen, and I want you to emphasize, oftentimes it's people that you really know and you trust.
Well, listen, you hit the nail on the head with that. You know, it's so important that you're tackling this topic tonight. It's often people who are closest to us. It's cousin Fred with an idea for a new business and it can't fail. And now you're the enemy if you don't give him some investment capital. It can be a child saying, hey, Mom, turn the house over to me so that you don't lose it in the event that you have to go to a nursing home later. But the minute I put my house in this child's name, I'm going to lose my property tax exemption depending upon where I live in the U.S., and I'm saddling the child with capital gains. You know, the bottom line is that we don't want to sign anything. We don't want to part with our money until we take a deep breath, wait at least 48 hours, run the concept by some people that you trust. Ideally, you know, as we're aging, we want to surround ourselves with a good group of people whose judgment we trust so that we can run things by them. Because as we get older, we will become targets to these people.
You know, I cannot emphasize enough how people are exploited through power of attorney. You need to be careful who you give your power of attorney to. You better be careful, because let me tell you something. You would think that they're going to go by your wishes, what's in the will. If you find yourself confronted with poor health, in fact, you will die is actually what will happen. And they'll put you in a cheap wooden box that costs $300 or $400, and what they want to do is keep all the money for themselves. I'm just telling you. And listen, how do you spot a con artist? And Mark can tell you, how do you spot them? They like to blend in. They like to dress for success. They often push poorly understood or little-known politics. Con artists bring out the worst in you. I'm just telling you. Con artists are fair weather friends. And for every silver lining, Ann-Margaret, you can complete this. There's a cloud.
Okay. Absolutely. I mean, they blend right in. You hit the nail on the head with that. And I'm reminded of the story. Do you remember the Boston Strangler who had Boston in a frenzy in the 60s? And how did he con his victims? Because the authorities were telling everyone at the time, don't open your door to a stranger. Everyone in Boston, particularly the women that this sicko was targeting, everyone was told, lock your door, don't let anyone in. So how did he keep finding new victims? And it turned out he made an investment at the Army and Navy store for a green, like, workman's jumpsuit. And he would just show up and he looked like a worker, and he said, your super sent me here because there's some problems with X, Y, or Z. So then the person let him in. So, you know, we can't be too careful. And I think, you know, it's not paranoia, but we would all be well advised to operate from the perspective that if I have 20 more dollars than my cousin Marge, she is trying to get it from me. And that's human nature. You know, we're trying to get what we can, but we need to protect ourselves from that. And I'm so glad that you brought up the topic of power of attorney. This is an essential document to have, but it should not allow the person that you're naming to change beneficiaries on a bank account. It should not allow the person to make gifts to himself or herself. We want to really customize a power of attorney. This is not a document that you can just sort of download off the internet, because a lot of trouble can ensue. I've seen family members use that power of attorney to clean people out of their life savings. I had a client, I practice estate planning and asset protection here in New York. I had a client who left her estate in the will 8 ways to her nieces and nephews. She passed away. The named executor in the will came to my office to begin the probate process and learned that her sister, who was named power of attorney a year prior, went to the banks, cleaned out all of the bank accounts, which totaled about $800,000. So at the end of the day, this person's estate was nothing. There was nothing left to probate or administer, and the will was worthless. So I'm glad you brought up that power of attorney point.
You know, listen, Ann-Margaret, you know what's so funny about this conversation is that there are people in your world, in your family, your friends, they envy the fact that you have money. They envy the fact that they don't have your life. I mean, it grows in them with anger, and they target. And the last thing, I don't care how much you trust someone, and I'm speaking from experience, don't ever allow anyone to have access to your bank accounts. You want to make sure that that bank send you a text to make sure you put that number in your phone, to make sure that you identify that that transaction is something that you approve. Because listen, Ann-Margaret, they're much more sophisticated than we are, because we're not crooked. We don't think like thieves. We don't think like con artists. We can never imagine the thought they put into, and sometimes they're willing to go the long haul with you. They're willing to stay in your life for 2 or 3 years because it's worth that investment of what they're hoping to take from you at the end of it all.
Yeah, I mean, they're absolutely brilliant. I'll never forget, I was appointed executor for an elderly gentleman who didn't have anyone in his life, and we became sort of friendly over the years. He would come to my office, I think just pretending that he had legal matters to discuss. He really just wanted a cup of coffee and a little friendship. He passed away, and I'm sorting through all of his bills, and I see one monthly check that he wrote for $75 a month to a company with the initials TJK. And I couldn't figure out what it was, so I'm looking backwards through all of his records, and this guy never threw anything out. And I found the original letter from TJK to this elderly gentleman saying, "You sing in the All Saints Episcopal Choir. You may not be aware that you are violating federal licensing and copyright law for the musical numbers that you're singing. If you send us a check for $75 a month, you're going to have full use of any song that you want to sing in the choir." And I thought, oh my goodness, you know, this guy was not stupid. And he just thought, okay, that sounds kind of plausible. I know there are music copyright laws, and this company is going to help me sort through all of that. But there's, you know, a special place, you know where, for these folks, but we cannot underestimate their ingenuity.
And, you know, Ann-Margaret, how about these government imposter scams, where they claim to be from the IRS another government agency, and they threaten the victims with arrests or other consequences if you don't. Oh, and what they want to do, they want to get your Social Security number. That's what they want to do. Listen, explain. I am so passionate about this tonight because let me tell you, I don't want anyone to get exploited. Please tell our audience tonight why you should never give anyone your Social Security number over the telephone.
That's a really good point. And the IRS goes out of their way to make public service announcements saying they will never, ever call you asking you for your Social Security number. That's not how they operate. Anyone who's had the bad luck to be audited like I have, you know that the IRS deals in snail mail. They will send you a letter and you'll have a phone number and it's all going to be laid out in black and white. Never under any circumstances give someone who is pretending to be from a government agency any credentials over the phone.
And let me just say this to you. You know, I want to get into this because let me tell you, one of the biggest scams, Ann-Margaret, is romance. Romance scams, okay? They create these fake profiles on these dating sites, Ann-Margaret, or social media to convince victims to send that money. And all they want to do is get your money. And people are so lonely, so empty. It's amazing how many times you tell them this is fake. And sometimes they know, but they're so desperate. And what they end up being at the end are just shattered people who've lost everything.
Yeah. 100%. Now, by way of background, I was a legal contributor to the Dr. Phil show for many, many years, and he did innumerable shows on this catfishing phenomenon. And my number one fan is my mother, and she would tune into all of these shows. So you would think that she learned something about this catfishing and the romance victimization, and then lo and behold, someone reaches out to her on Facebook telling her that she's so beautiful and, you know, he wants to spend the rest of his life with her. And what was he? I mean, this sounds like a punchline to a joke, but he held himself out as a Nigerian prince, and he just needed travel money to get to the U.S. because his accounts were frozen, and they're going to spend a beautiful life together, on and on and on and on. And my mother didn't mention it to me. I think she thought I'd be a little bit down on it, but she mentioned it to my sister, who told me about it, and we had, you know, kind of like an interception with her, an intervention rather, and fortunately she did not send any money to this quote-unquote Nigerian prince, but I have a colleague.
Hold the point about the colleague. And let me tell you, the most important thing you should learn tonight from this conversation, any of it, is this: don't ever think that you're so sophisticated and so smart and so wise that you cannot be scammed. It can happen to anybody. And once you realize that, that's where you begin to put in a process to make sure it doesn't happen to you by realizing it can happen to anybody. And Mary Margaret and I will be back, okay? I'm back with Ann-Margaret Carrozza. Ann-Margaret, when we were going out to break, I said the most important thing to realize is that we all can be scammed. And here's the thing about it, Ann-Margaret, very few of them get caught and are held accountable.
Yeah, I mean, it's a crying shame. And a lot of them, I find, my law practice is an estate practice. So I'm dealing with a lot of elderly folks, and I see what happens when they pass away. And a lot of these scammers and con artists will read the obituaries and they will target the widow or widower after the death of their spouse. If someone is isolated, if someone is alone, which is why it's so important that you're tackling this subject in a way that you're getting inside of people's homes who might not have a natural network of family and neighbors who come by to check in on them. So we need to give each other information. But there was a guy, a widower, who opened his front door one day, and there was a contractor. A lot of home improvement folks are trying to take your money, and even worse. So this contractor said that he was working on a home around the block, and he had some leftover materials, and he would be able to go up on the elderly guy's roof and spread a coat of polymer acrylic shield for only $50, and this guy's roof was going to last an extra 5 years. Now, to be honest, I don't know, sitting here today, that I would not have accepted that. It sounds very good. So he let the guy go up and supposedly spread this coat of polymer acrylic shield on the roof, came back down, he paid him the $50. And the quote unquote contractor said, boy, you have some problems up there. And the gentleman said, well, I haven't had any problems. And the guy said, here's my card. Call me in the future if you do. So what do you think happened the next time it rained? He had problems. He had water coming in. And it's quite obvious that
the bad guy created the problem. Amazing.
You're 100% right.
Oh, my goodness.
Unfortunately, the elderly guy found the business card, called him back, and he quoted him some crazy figure of like $25,000 to fix the problem. The elderly gentleman said, well, I don't have that kind of money. And the bad guy arranged for financing. And what ended up happening is that the financing called for monthly payments that this poor guy could not come up with. And he ended up signing over his house as collateral for this debt. And there was a good outcome here because a neighbor grew suspicious and contacted the Queens District Attorney's Office. And this particular scam artist did spend some time in prison. But you're right, the overwhelming majority of these folks are not caught. And I think a lot of it is once someone recognizes that they've been victimized, they feel ashamed, they feel stupid, and they shouldn't. It could happen to me. You said it has happened to you. So it's so important to get the word out there that this really can happen to anyone. They're trying to target us at a time that we're particularly vulnerable, and we need to keep our guard up.
Listen, I can laugh at myself because, I can do dumb things. They can call me at the right time, and, I can make an investment without consulting and thinking I know what I'm doing. But you got to understand, you listen, you need the presence of other minds, especially when you're making those kind of decisions. What about these criminals who may call and pretend to be a grandchild in need, and these crazy sweepstakes and lottery scams? Scammers may offer fake prizes. Are lotteries? It's just...
It's really happening. I've had a client who was woken up at 2 a.m. and now with artificial intelligence, all they have to do is listen in on a phone call, and they have the technology to do that. And they replicate this loved one's voice. And through AI, they can orchestrate a call at 2 a.m. that grandma has to wire cash, or, you know, her young loved one is going to prison for the night. So, you know, with AI, the ability of con artists is really going to increase. So we need to get our acts together and inform ourselves and take precautions.
Listen, so I got to ask you this. What's your story when you were a scammer? What really got you going? Because you wrote a book about this. So this is personal also.
Yeah, well, yeah, okay.
Yes. Okay, yes.
So when I was in law school and I was up to my eyeballs in debt, I had what I thought was a very good idea to look around the house or the small apartment rather, and identify things that I might be able to sell to generate a little extra cash, you know, to try and get my act together and save it and invest it. And I found this beautiful dress with the tag still on it. And what did I do with it in the 1990s to sell it? I put it on eBay. Long story short, a guy bid on it. He was the winning bidder. He sent me a check for it. I sent him the dress, and he accidentally, well, I didn't send him the dress until the check cleared. Okay, I want to be clear about that. I was in law school at the time. So I deposited the check. I called the bank. Are the funds available? My bank told me, yes, the funds are available. So then I sent him the dress. Okay. Then I got a notice from the bank that the check bounced. And I called the bank ready to rip someone's head off. And I said, well, what do you mean the check bounced? You told me that the funds were available. And the banker said, I did not say that the check cleared. I said that the funds were available because we were letting you use your savings account to make these funds available, subject to the check actually clearing. So, you know, I was scammed, and the guy got the better of me. He got a dress, I got nothing, and I had a $20 fee with the bank to boot because of the bounce check. So,
you know, I'm actually glad you brought that up because there's an important lesson here. I'd forgotten about this scam. You know, I'm in real estate, and there was a property that we were renting. And someone from London saw the property and decided they wanted to rent it. And they said, but they could not rent it. This was like February. They could not rent it until around July. So I said, but that's not going to work. They said, well, what if I could send you the money in advance, and then I'll add another $20,000, because I know you may not feel right about it. This person wrote a check for $50,000, okay? Lo and behold, DHL delivered the check the next day to my office. But you know, you got to go with your gut sometime. And I said to myself, why would someone send me that kind of money? They don't know me. Took it to the bank. The bank said the funds in the account. And then and then my financial guy, Brandon, I said, something's not right with this. Then we decided to go to the bank. The bank said the check cleared. I said, the check cleared. So I said, let's just wait a few more days before we do it. This is my gut. The only thing I was leaning on was my gut. Lo and behold, because the way they hold these checks, 7 to 10 days later, the check never had the money. It was a bogus check, and it was written with a false number on the bank account that supposedly was sent from. Had I cashed that check, because like you said, you had the money in the bank to cover it just in case it bounced, but they don't explain that to you. You can really get whacked. I mean, it could just turn your life topsy-turvy. If you don't understand, if somebody sends you that kind of money, you want to make sure that that money, if it's 14 days, is in the account.
Yeah, right. Well, you had some good radar, right? If it sounds too good to be true, it is. I'll give you one. As a practicing estate attorney, I deal with complex trust for super wealthy people who are concerned about estate taxes. So I had one young entrepreneur who was worth over $100 million because of this company that he founded. It was about to go public. And a half hour into this meeting, where I was interested in the company, you get to know your clients through this estate planning process. And toward the end of the meeting, he asked me if I would be interested in learning more about the company to invest in it. And at this point, like you with your renter from London, my antenna went up a little bit. And I said, okay, send me some more info about it. And the way it works in my office, they do have to pay a little consultation fee for the first meeting, but then they get to use that as a credit toward future work. So this guy gave me a check for his consultation fee. He went on his merry way. I never heard from him again. And yes, of course, you can finish the story. That check bounced. So this guy was so brilliant. He must have, leased or rented a car for a day, a fancy sports car. He came in looking like James Bond to my office and had me, really impressed with him that such a young guy was worth over $100 million. And it was all a facade to try and get this, attorney practicing in Bayside, Queens, to think this is the next Apple stock and I should put my life savings in it. So none of us are beyond being scammed or being victimized.
You know what? I cannot thank Ann-Margaret enough for her book, Love and Money, and the various types of scammers she points out, and how she talks about how people fall victim when it comes to love and trying to separate you from your money. How can someone get a copy of your book? We've got to have you back. It's just been one. I feel like I know you because the experience connects people. We can relate.
You're great. So Love and Money is available on Amazon. If anyone wants to reach out to me directly with a question, my website is myassetprotectionattorney.com.
myassetprotectionattorney.com. Ann-Margaret Carrozza, thank you so much for joining us. When we come back, get a load of this. Guess what is the number one demographic that's contracting STD? People over 70 years old, because they feel they can have unprotected sex because they cannot get pregnant. Yes, and these senior homes, they're doing it up, but at a huge cost. We're going to talk about that with Dr. Dorree and Lynn when we return on this edition of Your Voice, Your Future. Don't go away.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence. There's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. You know, you cannot even imagine the shock of my life when I was doing this research and they talked about the rise in STDs and the demographic that it was really rapidly climbing. So disproportionately affected were older adults. And data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention shows that among those 65 and older, it's more than triple some of these diseases like gonorrhea and others from 2010 to 2023. Gonorrhea cases multiplied about sixfold and syphilis cases increased nearly tenfold. And I asked myself, is this a result of the misconception that condoms are primarily used to prevent pregnancy? And since this is no longer a concern in this age group, is it that many forego condoms? And I said to myself, I said to Aaron, we got a book, Dr. Lynn. This is her topic. First of all, I must tell you, there you are. First of all, let me just say this. I was shocked that at that age, they were still sexually active every week. I was stunned. You look fabulous, by the way.
Thank you, sir. I'm in that age group, you know.
Are you? But you're not doing it still, are you? You're done with that, right?
If I answer you, do you answer me?
Huh? That's a very... AD,
Well,
tell me this stuff.
In my view,
Huh?
in my view, Armstrong, sex has no expiration date.
Okay, it's fair. This is what we're talking about, AD. Come on. Dr. Lori Kelly,
Sure.
you can handle this. It's fair. This is how we talk.
You know, it's good for you.
But I'm sure whatever you're doing, you practice it safe and you're not reckless with it. How can we get across? Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, more than half of men, Dr. Lori, and 31% of women between
Remember,
the ages...
it's Dorree with a D.
Ma'am?
Armstrong. D. Dorree. It's
Dorree.
okay, Aaron.
So,
We'll do.
are you surprised they're so sexually active and contract
Not at
these
all.
diseases?
Not at all.
Explain this phenomenon to us.
Well, there's a number of reasons, and I'm personally very glad the study has come out. You know, I'm just going to go back in history for a minute. In the 1900s, which is not what we're talking about exactly, people only lived until they were 30 or 40. So the only sex primarily for older people was procreation. Now we have doubled that lifespan, doubled it. And we keep getting older. So why have diseases increased? There are many multiple reasons, Armstrong. And as I said, sex has no expiration date, and it's healthy. It's good for you. It keeps your hormones alive. It keeps you active. It keeps you happy. It keeps you healthy. So what's happening with people? This is the boomer generation. And we, the boomers, have broken boundaries. And now they're breaking boundaries again. But they're not educated. And people just like you are shocked. Very few people want to think that their grandmother or their mother or their father or their grandfather are still in what I would call testosterone road and estrogen avenue. You know, they're still healthy and going at it. And so we need to educate people on this misconception. Because why do we have disease? We have it because we're not educated. Even physicians, if you saw the Medicare form, it's really delightful. It's how many times have you fallen and are you taking care of your rugs so that you don't trip? Nobody says how many orgasms have you had this week or this month. That's a taboo subject. And younger physicians don't talk about it either. Educators don't talk about it. So we have healthier people. We have new methodologies for erectile dysfunction and for vaginal dryness. So those are no longer such barriers. Most people in my generation think of condoms as for conception and they don't realize they need it, and they do. If I were ruling the world, which I don't, I would have condoms in every nursing home, every building where we have a collection of older people. And just think, seniors, as I'm happy to be married and not living in a nursing home, but they're like college students put together. They're dating, they want the warmth and contact and sexual connection. They're on dating apps. Many of them have lost spouses or have gotten divorced, and they're out there swinging, but they don't know they still need protection. Very few people talk about it. So we're healthier, we're living longer, we have misperceptions and very little genuine communication. We don't teach about condom use, and we don't even tell you that with condoms you can still get an STI or sexually transmitted infection or disease. And the condoms that feel good, this is good for young people as well, the condoms that feel good are the least good, like lambskin, because they're permeable and they don't protect you. So if you're dating, if you're in connection with somebody, whatever the age, you have to do the same things that teenagers are taught. You have to get a sexual history, you have to communicate, and communication is hard for most people of most ages. You have to teach them. You have to ask your partner if they've been sexually active, because if they have, they're bringing an unknown history to you. You might want to get them to get a test for sexual infections before you go to bed with them. Even oral sex can produce a sexually transmitted disease or infection, and very few people know that. Very few people know that there are multiple kinds of condoms, and condoms are important unless you have a clear test. We're just not educating my generation, and most people, not all, are just as surprised as you are that people like me might still be enjoying the benefits of a good relationship, or they might just be hooking up. I don't know if you've ever seen some of the nursing homes or residences. They are like college dorms. People are fortunately put together. Our society has changed. Older people are no longer living with families. They're hip. They're swinging. When I say swinging, they're active. I don't mean that they're necessarily swingers.
But don't you think the facilities should teach them or educate them about sex education?
Absolutely. People like me are brought into some facilities, and when you have a health lecture, health about heart, health about brain, health about moving, health about eating, you get a good turnout. When you have a lecture about sexuality, you get a magnificent turnout. People want to know, and it's the educators who don't teach them. I have another idea. Not only do we need to know condoms, you tell me, Armstrong, no, about condoms, excuse me. You tell me, Armstrong, why should we let our college-age kids have the freedom in their dorms? We now have mixed dorms in most schools, not all. Why shouldn't we respect our elders and have do not disturb signs on their doors so that they know it's acceptable to have an intimate relationship? Most people, not all again, are bashful. They don't communicate about sex, even in this day and age when boomers are doing it. You know, we are the generation that broke through barriers. We absolutely need to educate. Physicians don't ask. They're shy. And if somebody doesn't bring it up, most people of my generation are a little bit bashful too. They're afraid to bring it up. Children don't want to know that their parents are doing the same thing they are, or maybe they're doing it more, or their grandparents, heaven forbid, those gray-haired boomers. Many of us are gray-haired, whether we look it or not. They're still active. And you have to think, if society has changed as much as it has, which it has, there's not really a question of right or wrong unless it's something very moral within your ethos or your religion. People benefit from connection, they benefit from contact, they benefit from warmth, and orgasms are good for you.
It just shocks me how comfortable, how knowledgeable, how wise you are about this topic. You know what's fascinating? Since oftentimes these sexually transmitted diseases are misdiagnosed, maybe we should do a better job of screening at these facilities. I want to talk about that when you come back. You know what? I was a little uncomfortable, but I know you. You and I have known each other for so long, and you're educating people, and you got to educate people in a way where you don't want them to fear it or feel like they're doing something wrong or they're too old for this, because they're doing this, and if you're going to protect them, they're doing it. Oh yeah, they're doing it.
Listen, they did a recent study. We can talk about that later, about the number of people.
I'm going to do that. Let me take seniors. I remember this song. Someone said sisters are doing it for themselves. Let me tell you, seniors are doing it, okay? They're doing that. We'll be back. Don't go away. My.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
It seems to me that once a person has been diagnosed with STD, they should be monitored to make sure that it does not spread. It sounds reasonable. And what precautions are needed in these facilities to protect others who don't have the awareness, may not understand they could be sleeping with someone who's a carrier? You want to protect their livelihood.
Of course you do. Well, there are a number of things that can be done. Of course, condoms are important. Education is the key. And unfortunately, there's a mixed battle going on. Nursing homes or senior residences are not the most advanced in educating. They don't want lawsuits. They don't want family members saying, are you letting my parent have intercourse with her neighbor or his neighbor? So they're in a bind and they don't easily educate. If you are dating as a participant, and many of these people have not dated in many years, especially if they have lost a spouse, they don't know dating etiquette. They need to be told, you do have a right to ask for a clearance test, as a teenager is taught to do. You do have a right to see a health report before you sleep with somebody, because you're not only sleeping with them, you're sleeping with everyone they may have slept with. And in today's world, when women live about 6 years, 7 years longer than men, men do have multiple partners. It's not just because they're men, it's just that the population is skewed in men's favor. So they need to be educated very much. And remember, I come from a generation, you almost come from a generation where this is not talked about. And we need to, as you are, Armstrong, doing this so well, is we need to bring it out into the open and say, world, whatever you think, the vision of grandma or grandpa smoking their pipe or just baking cookies may not be accurate. Yes, they still are loving people and they still want connection. And when you asked a good question, there's frequently the chlamydia, syphilis, all the diseases are simply misdiagnosed because even the professional community doesn't think about their parents often having sex. I remember a wonderful case study many years ago, not so many years ago, perhaps 8, where a woman went to doctors with a vaginal infection and it was not diagnosed. And she brought up and said, my husband has herpes or whatever it is, and we had intercourse last night. Do you think that could be it? She was the one who brought it to the medical profession. So,
Well, shouldn't they just ask their physicians for meds?
they don't know. They don't know the symptoms. They don't know does an average people know the symptoms of syphilis or herpes or chlamydia or any of the other sexually transmitted disease? They don't know. They need to be educated, and physicians need to be educated. They too are a little bit blind and think, this woman is too old, this man is too old. And
I'm standing here trying to conceptualize an 80-year-old having sex. I'm telling you, I can't wrap myself around it.
I'm older than that.
Oh,
I am.
But you're with your husband, though.
Yes, and I don't know what I would do without it. Without my husband.
But you're safe. You're safe. You're still.
Of course, I'm safe. But I'm educated, Armstrong.
Yes, you are very.
And I've been educating people for years. I go into nursing homes and talk to people.
Is it they're looking for companionship? They're just lonely, and maybe. Look, as I listen to this conversation, the last place. It's okay. Listen.
Go on.
There must be something deeper going on here with seniors. That there's something that's missing. Are they neglected? What is it?
They're human.
Because they cannot be fulfilled by having whatever. It just can't fulfill them and complete them. There's got to be something that's missing.
Missing is companionship, warmth, touch. Even massage is known to help people. So why wouldn't people who are thrown together, mostly in communities, because that's where most of the statistics come from, why wouldn't they seek out warmth, companionship, and yes.
Well, set them up to be. Get somebody in there to massage them if they need touching. Massage them. Give them therapy.
I think what's wrong with them? They don't need therapy. I think you are absolutely talking about the modern conception and why there is disease. You're in a state of shock. I remember one of my kids when she was about 9 looking at me, and I was much younger as she was, and she said, "Mom, do old people do it? They're smelly and they're wrinkly and yuck." And I was a mother and I simply said, well, yes, they still do it, but God or nature or however you want to think about it is very kind. Everything slows down. And if it slows down, and many people say slowing down makes sex better than when they were younger, because when you're young, it's just wild, raging hormones. Now they're a little bit more sophisticated and they know what they want and even how to do a loving relationship. And I remember I said to my daughter, and she looked at me. Children are curious. They're not judgmental. They're just curious. And she said, "Oh," and she went off to play. And that was the end of it. And I've never forgotten that because she epitomizes the younger generation's view of people like you and me, Armstrong. I'm not asking you what you do, but I would never judge you as having something wrong with you.
So the attractiveness, the youthfulness, that is replaced with something else. You find beauty in your husband's aging body. You see something that stimulates you and excites you. I think that's what shocks me.
I think that's one of the things that changes with age. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And perhaps as people get older, what they look for are different kinds of beauty. It's not a question necessarily of how smooth your skin is, or how curvaceous your body is, or how large your penis is even. People look for warmth, intelligence, a soul, people who have lived as they have. Their values change. I talked to a very interesting, to a friend recently, a lovely man who is single, and he wrote an article for me. I'm publishing a book, and he said, I am a better lover now than I ever was when I was younger, because I can take my partner's needs into consideration. I never really understood what that meant. He said, it's better for me too at this age. And I really appreciated this man, who is not a big sex expert, being so open with me and saying, you know, it's better. I can feel more. I can be tender. I can be loving. I can be passionate. I didn't know these things when I was younger. So,
you know, so you never desired someone younger. You're pleased with what you have now.
Me, I always appreciate a good hunk. But do I have to act on my fantasy? Of course not.
Wow, you are special. Let me tell you.
What about you, Armstrong?
What now?
What about you?
Well, we're not going to talk about me. I'm gonna absorb the lessons and the education that I received from you tonight. That's what's important. I have a whole different perspective on this now.
You know, there's what's it? Look but don't touch. People. I'm not going to get into moral places, but people can think many thoughts. Some religions think that's wrong.
Well, here's my thought. I'm walking away with someone whose soul feel their worth, feel their power, and feel they're just as passionate for their lover than they have ever been in their life. And I honor you, and I respect you, and I thank you for joining us. I'm Armstrong Williams. This is why this is your voice, your future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dorree Lynn. Thank you all.